From the former convent of the Good Shepherd overlooking Inwood Hill Park in New York City, welcome to Inwood Artworks On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home in what we affectionately call Upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and today we welcome visual artist Ana Paula Cordeiro. A 2020 Pollock Krasner awardee and currently an artist research fellow at the Hispanic Society of Americas, Ana Paula Cordeiro thrives in the communal space. A founding member of the Introspective Collective, in 2018, she co-curated a multimedia installation at the Clemente and co-authored a book about making books titled Bookforms. Originally from Brazil, she does her work at the Center for Book Arts Shared Shop. Her artist books are collected by major institutions in the U.S. and abroad. We're going to talk to her about her work and so much more. But first, let me welcome you, Ana Paula, to Inwood Artworks On Air. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, excellent to be here. Thank you.
My pleasure. So how you been?
Good. To be emerging with the end of the pandemic, like everybody else, and feeling the sense of air and contact and being slightly overwhelmed.
Yeah, it feels like things are opening up, right?
Yeah,
they are.
It's a
good feeling.
They are, yes. We have to adjust, but it's a good adjustment.
Yeah, it's a very good adjustment, which allows us to do not only be a person, but also practice our craft and do our art, right, as well, which is great to be able to, like, we couldn't do this really 2 years ago.
Yeah.
This is wonderful to be able to do.
Yeah.
So let's jump in and talk about your art, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
All right. So we're going to talk about bookmaking.
Okay.
Which all the cool people do.
Let's talk about bookmaking.
Let's talk about. See, look at her.
The nerds.
Look at her big. If you can't hear through your audio speakers, folks, her smile just went from microphone to microphone, mine to hers, and she's so excited. I'm excited too because I'm a big nerd. She's not. She's a beautiful person.
Thank you.
So let's just talk from the wider scope and work our way in. So how did you find your way into book art?
Accidentally. I fell into the rabbit hole. I used to be next door to a place called the Center for Book Arts. I was at a point in life where I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life, and I had some aspirations, but I couldn't put my finger down what would be the means to actualize them. And I was a photographer at that time. I wanted to find a way that I could have some sense of time-based narrative of my photographic work. I didn't want to have work that was good enough for magazines. That never inspired me. I wanted to be able to tell a story, but with stills. And I thought I could learn how to make books so I could have a little bit control over that. In short, I wanted to learn how to make photo albums and add content to my own photo albums. And from there on, it was a whole new world, and that was a long time ago.
Well, when was that? What year was that?
2002.
2002.
Yeah.
20 years plus.
Yeah.
How about that?
Did not see it coming. I'm very happy I'm here right now, but when I look in retrospect, it was a bit of a miracle.
Well, and you're here to tell a tale, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So this may sound like common sense, which is sometimes eludes me, but I'll say it anyway for myself. Do you find the first challenge to overcome with book art is that despite all the materials that go into making it, it isn't just to be looked at, but to be experienced.
Yeah.
With the intention for each page to be looked at and informed by its texture, volume, weight, color, etc., so on, as well as its content.
Yeah, it's something to work on. It gallery space is not designed or defined for that kind of experience. It's a handicap that the entirety of the medium has to offer. It's not the kind of thing you imagine, like, for instance, people have a solo show with books. Doesn't quite sound right. It sounds like this is a library, not an art gallery. Right. We are in the kind of we are in an in-between place. And that is a difficulty, but I find that challenge exciting because it makes it be that to one of the small interactions that each piece gets to have with a person, it is by in itself an exception. And as an exception, it lives with it. That person who is going to experience that exception feels the weight of it, feels the presence of it. And it just feels like the work comes more alive that way. It's still something to be worked on, how we move on in how we navigate the world where things are meant to be consumed in a much quicker fashion or with much less. The word that comes often people talk about books is meditative. I'm not quite sure the word works well, but it is a quality of it. There is a meditative quality to the making, and there is a type of presence to the interacting with the work that it requires a special set of circumstances. And the people who are lucky enough or who just find themselves serendipitously, like I found myself, surrounded by that, are touched. That's something that goes with them for the rest of their life, essentially, as opposed to one more of the many things that are out there for people to have.
Yeah, and I think it does help. It's funny when you mentioned like a gallery show of book art. It's like I think you almost need like. It's kind of sad to see if you walked in, because sometimes you walk into a gallery and there's like somebody sitting at the desk and there's like you just walk down the hall in an empty space, right?
Yeah.
And you're left alone in this kind of cold, like just vacuous place, vacuous place. I say not vacuum, vacuous place. And it's like, can you imagine like all these just books sitting there going like, how the hell am I going to,
what am I supposed to do?
Like, what the hell am I supposed to do? Read all of them? And, like page through them all. That's work, or whatever. But, and I think it does take a good curator and a good help. And I think that's why I brought it up in our conversation, saying like, I think it's important to urge people to be adventurous and move forward, because how many times were we told not to touch? And your mother slaps your hands away from the artwork or whatever, or the museum piece, whatever. So I think it's important to encourage people to experience it, which leads me into talking about your latest project, Body of Evidence, which I want people to know about and experience. Quote, Body of Evidence invites the reader to be an empathetic witness to the tension between a desire for privacy and a desire to be open and welcoming, end quote. That was from you, somehow, somewhere. Having only been able to witness it online thus far myself, personally, I had such a desire to examine each page, like clues to a collective mystery that may never be solved, but also observing in the individual attention of each page, the book within the book, so the books within the book, so to speak, right? So would you mind speaking to your journey in building the narrative of the book? Because I had such a wonderful and I won't say there's so too many different adjectives, but like, I got caught up in the individual story of the page, and then also mindfulness of the larger, of saying, how does this fit into the larger narrative? So I was just curious in your journey in putting it together.
It was quite a journey. I have found out, not that I had a plan for it, but that is how it turned out to be, that when I go to make a book, I look back to my old books. I keep journals, I collect materials, I build my own journals from scratch. And when it comes time to have a body of work that is going to be consolidated, I consult my older previous works that are very private, and I extract material from that. And I tend to pepper that with the experience at large, what I can find of references in literature or talks that I have attended or things that I have seen or witnessed or being things that people shared with me, and that all ends up to be, in a way, part of the book. What that creates is it's a narrative that is not linear, and it's like looking at an abstract paint in a way, and trying to figure out if those apparently random strokes do form something that you can identify as something that exists in the physical realm.
Fragments of a larger picture, maybe.
Pretty much. And it adds up to it. I have a friend who said that once she read one of my books and she said, I learned something. I just don't know what it was.
Great.
Yeah, it is. It's books can be anything, right? That's one thing that is exciting about making books at this day and age, because with digitalization, books don't have to be what they were supposed to be anymore.
Well, you don't
information comes from anywhere.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you don't have to have a literal response to a book.
Yeah, pun intended.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
And being truthful, it's like the visceral response is enough.
That's precisely what I'm out to get. I want people to feel it, but not feel it because they connect with their minds, or because it added to some piece of information or to some category, but because they feel emotional.
Well, that's wonderful. It's a wonderful description because without trying to impose anything definitive about the book or how you're supposed to be feeling or blah, 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 I'm curious because I felt this way going through. If there was a deliberate impulse to this project to attempt to evoke and maybe test me at times the individual's capacity for empathy and both on an immediate level with the individual pages and the all-encompassing levels with how the fragments created how they moved within the pages.
Yeah, that's a great response. That's absolutely wonderful response. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, that's how I responded to things that have not necessarily books, but to just singular experiences where I wasn't quite expecting to be engaged, and I found myself transformed in a way once I walked into a fabric store, and I saw so many different patterns that I got out of it as if something had clicked inside of me, and I couldn't see the world again the same way I was looking at it anymore. And I think those, because it was an experience that was not something that I was prepared for. It added to a different dimension in a way, and I suppose that's one thing that happens with books. People are not expecting to be touched, because they don't realize that they are touching the object. There is a word for that. It's called haptic. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that
Haptic.
word. Haptic, yeah.
I am now.
HAPTIC. It refers to the type of information that you receive from your senses when you're reading something. I mean, that is one interpretation of it. I'm sure there is people more qualified to give you a good, concise definition. My reading of it, the way I relate to the word, is it's like a sixth sense in a way. When you're reading something, if you're reading from a screen, you have one response. If you're reading from something that you hold, you have a different response. That is something that filters the way we receive the information. And the weight and the volume and the texture of the object you're reading from also inform how you absorb the physical information that is not physical, the intellectual the intellectual information that is present on the book. That all adds, and that all creates dimensions. That's what it comes down to be. Things get to be not just flat on the page and not just a cerebral processing, but it's almost like information comes from everywhere around you, as if so.
I think if you get down to the whole idea, Haptic is maybe the way you interact with the material physically.
The way
is part of it.
The way, the physicality of the material interferes with how you absorb the information the material contains.
That's right. That's what I was getting from it.
Yeah.
And I mean, on a very basic level, I still print out PDFs or Word documents on my computer, and I love to have them and mark them up. And if someone gives me something to read, if someone gives me as they do almost every other day, a new script to read or whatever, I always I know I can't print them all up, but the ones I really want to spend time on, I always print out.
You have to print. You have to.
I love to.
You want to hold it.
I want to hold it. I want to mark it up.
Yeah.
I want to break it down, and I want it to. And they, as any, with my theater background, it's that the script you create for yourself ends up becoming a work of art in itself.
Yep.
Becomes your own roadmap to your understanding of the material.
Yep. It becomes yours.
Yeah, I don't think you want people marking up your book, but unless that's a book art project that people want to do.
Good project.
But I think it'd be a cool project to seeing, how. Here I am telling people what to do, but I'm just saying, but what an interesting process of saying it's not complete without interpersonal, people,
Yeah.
Their additions ends up adding to the artwork and making it whole in some way.
There is a Brazilian poet called Mário Quintana who wrote that he thinks that his books, and that was before I knew anything about book arts. I'm sure that I suspect that he didn't know much about book arts, because book arts are a bit of an alien in space, and I have never heard such a thing being in Brazil. But I suspect he wrote it from a different place. He was not thinking about that as a category. He was thinking about that as something that was coming from his heart. He said that he wanted his books to be printed with wide margins so the children could write around and draw around it, and those would become part of the book. So each one of his books would have, it would be like each one of his books would be its own piece of work, as opposed to the regular edition.
Yeah, participation.
Yeah.
That's the word I was searching for earlier,
Yep.
and it eluding me. Well, what a great idea. But I'd like to go back a little further now on the multimedia installation and now group, I believe, the Introspective Collective. Which used Joseph Cornell's life and art as the inspiration framework to create art that can be both reflective and also an advocate for change. It began with your show at the Clemente, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And has gone on.
It has gone on because you invited me to have the piece at Cabrini.
Was that the next thing you guys did?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
We had another thing that was about to happen that month and got canceled because of the pandemic.
Oh, geez. Okay.
I know, in Boston.
At least we got yours in.
Yeah, right.
But that was the last show we've done since then, too.
We just made it. And we didn't know what we were getting into it, did we? We looked back, we did like the three of us were in the show. We looked back and thinking that was the last time we got together.
Oh.
And physically,
yeah.
Not last time forever. And we have gotten together in many different ways. But throughout the pandemic, we found ourselves mesmerized the fact that we had no idea that would have been so meaningful to us, because that was literally the cusp of it, right?
Yeah,
everything was
really
about
was.
It was the last thing we did before everything got completely transferred.
Yeah.
So
we'll have to find out another time to do it again.
Yeah, right. You keep going. So it was an introspective collective. It's not a group. It is a free-forming assemble of different people with different goals. Essentially, what we want is to offer. I'm sure I can find you a very concise definition if I look up somewhere. My co-conspirator Cara wrote an excellent description of it, but I forgot to bring it with me, so I'm going to give you my feeling for it, which is that we want to be involved. We want to be involved with the act of showing. We don't want to deliver a work to the gallery. We want the gallery to be part of the work. And that's how the Clemente installation got motivated, got inspired for. That's where the inspiration came from. We wanted to be able to create our own exhibition space. The artists would be, because we do that as artists. The vast majority of my friends' artists juggle different art making gigs and jobs and opportunities. A whole bunch of us are art handlers, a whole bunch of us are administrators, a whole bunch of us teach, and those are all things that don't come up to bear when we have the white space. The white space seems to be this kind of sacred space where only the art shows. And I'm not very happy about it. I wanted to see more of what the raw emotions that go with making art. So that particular installation, the Clemente, the idea was that everybody who was participating on the show had also something to do with the making of the show in itself. And the work was created for the show. It was very site-specific. It was an amazing experience. We had a very short notice, and we managed to pull it off with a bit of miracles here and there, and it was like reading a book that has been made by hand. It was a unique experience for all of us. Turned up to be with 20 artists. We didn't expect we can have that much turnaround on a short notice, but it was encompassed film, encompassed photographs, poetry, the artwork that was made for the site, which was something that was inspired by Joseph Cornell's his chosen medium, or the medium that chose him, if people can look at that way too. The shadow boxes that we had a set format, and we were talking about climate change, and any iteration of the theme. It could be social, it could be environmental, it could be political, and we all had pretty original and authentic interpretation of it in a very short period of time. It was great. I'd love to do something like that again.
Is there any plans for the group to do something in maybe next year or later this year?
Not as of yet, but we have the intention. Things got so thrown up in the air with the pandemic.
Sure.
Then we kind of lost our thread. As I said, we had a show that was canceled up in Boston, which was poetry based.
Okay.
A bunch of we were curating a version of it that was just related to poetry. We're probably going to reconnect with that, see that through, and then put energy into what's going to be the next iteration of this larger collective environment.
Well, you have time.
I have, yes. Thank you. That's good to know. I should listen to that on a regular basis. I'm going to save this little portion of the podcast and put it on repeat. I have time.
You have time.
I have time.
You're like, God, I'm so sick of hearing Aaron's voice.
I know.
So tell us about your, well, I don't know if you have time because you have a residency right now as the Artist Research Fellow at the Hispanic Society of America. What are you working on there?
I am just starting that out. That was another thing that got to a rough start with the pandemic. We just, as a group, collected around maybe the month before the pandemic, and the pandemic came, and we don't know what we're doing. Nobody knows what they're doing.
By the way.
Yeah,
you're
thank you.
Staying at home for 2 years.
Right. So we got a little pushed along the road, which was good because we had all the things to worry about it. We couldn't really I couldn't at that point wrap my mind around what would be my focus of it. So it turned out that now is the best time for me to get engaged on it, and I had started just recently, a couple of months ago. It's not so much a residency; it is a research fellowship, and it's a pilot program. Alexander Campos, who was the Center for Book Arts director for many years, is now the development coordinator or director at the Hispanic Society, and he created this program for which he got funding from a foundation that now escapes me, but I will make sure I get to you at some point because it's nice to credit.
It is.
They're basically paying us to come over and take a look at the collection and tell them why we chose those pieces and what has inspired us to do with it. The collection is vast, and the Hispanic Society, I've been there, the story. It's one of the...
Not recently, but yes.
But you understand that the scope of it, the collection is enormous.
Yeah.
It's the enormity of it. That's another reason why it was good to not start right away, because you didn't know what you're looking at. It's like the blind people touching the elephant and think it's a rope, or thinking it's this part and the other part. The thing is enormous, and there's the breadth and the scope of it. It's just breathtaking. I spent some time not even knowing what it was that I wanted to be interested in, that I wanted to look at it. For a while, and that's something that was very refreshing about it. It felt like that impulse that I had, and I suppose many people have as younger people, that you are getting to something you don't know what it is, and it can be anything. And it doesn't necessarily have like a goal, or it's like it becomes what is supposed to be play work, unsupervised and uncharted territory for us to explore. That's the feeling that I get. Right now I'm feeling a little more in it. I'm looking into books that talk about how Europeans look at the Native Americans and the people who are indigenous populations. And also at books itself, of course. There's a whole lot of books there. There's thousands and thousands of books to be looked at.
She's smiling again, folks, if you can't see it.
And maps. They have a great collection of maps of how the Americas are represented, how people would, something that tickles me a lot, how people would feel in the space they didn't know what it was, and what kind of, how they would decorate the little area that was completely beyond their ability to know and see. There's so much to be enjoyed about that. Yeah, we are going to have a program tomorrow night, as a matter of fact.
Awesome.
I know.
And many more, I hope.
Yeah,
well,
hopefully.
It's amazing. Well, I'm so proud of you. You're really kicking butt.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you want to talk about we haven't touched on?
Yeah. When we start talking about books, there was an aspect of it that came just about to be talked about it, and then we got distracted and went somewhere else. I think there is some potential to be explored, and it's something that I'm very eager to do in relationship to having the book viewing experience as a performance in and of itself. And I'm going to make a disclaimer here before, as I just mentioned to you before, I am not a performer. I had stage fright since I was age 0. To be observed in the act of doing something is something that causes me a lot of anxiety and tension. And yet, I feel that the book has the potential to be experienced as something that brings that characteristic. It represents so many things. And the way people interact with books has so much representation in and of itself. Books were the things that held the sacred texts. That was the function of the book to start with, to be the word of God. And then the next iteration of that will be to be what holds value. The books were made to be accounting tools. So they were lists and lists and lists of goods, and what the birth of capitalism came out to be. Goods and transactions, and keeping track of everything that was exchanged between people and goods and services. There is something about relating to the book as an authority, to the physical object of the book as an authority, that I'm very curious about, and I'm wanting to dedicate some more time investigating and perhaps creating a work. And part of it that is an exciting challenge for me is, as I said many times, I don't like to perform, I don't like to be in front of the cameras, I freak out when there is some sense of being observed at all. But that challenge is interesting to me. I feel like there is so much to be learned about doing something that is so extremely out of my comfort zone. Because at this point, books are second nature to me. It's something that I'm very fluid with it. I don't know where I start and the book ends, or where the book starts when I end. It's like one thing leads to the other. But to add another dimension that is to explore it from the performatic perspective is a serious challenge.
Yeah.
And I think it has a lot of potential, not just for me, but for the medium. I wanted to explore it because I feel like as a medium, it deserves to be considered by more than libraries, and not the I love libraries. I could be a library bug for the rest of my life and be a happy bug. But there's more out there for the book, and I feel like bridging that between multidisciplinary approaches is pretty much the way I would like to see this going. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great. You kind of answered both questions, the last one and this one, as far as like maybe what's next for you. And,
it is it, yeah.
And actually, where we're going, and going back to that first question or early question about, experiencing the book. It's not just because of all the, they see it as a precious piece of art sitting there because you spent so much time and effort creating with all these different very unpronounceable name materials to create whatever this
very outdated technology
thing that contains more things within that creates a collective thing that is somehow poetic and also has some kind. How to experience it is not just from one sense. And I think it kind of, let's wrap it all together here, and this hopefully a tiny bow for you, is that, multimedia, printing out, holding the pages, not just on a screen, or it's on a screen and in your hands, or there's a combination of both or one or the other, and how you're consuming the information, you're touching the different materials, you're reading the content, and you're processing the content, and you're giving yourself ways to experience the material. It's not walking into a gallery and seeing a book that's nicely created and crafted and bound, put together. That's not enough. It's finding ways to putting yourself through the humanity, using your own humanity to explore the humanity of the book. I guess that sounds excellent. Does that sound okay to you?
That sounds excellent.
I almost lost the handle there for a second.
But you got it.
But I brought it back.
You brought it back, and you brought it back with style. Good job.
Thank you
Using
very
your
much.
humanity to explore the humanity of the object. That's excellent. I like that a lot.
I knew I was getting there. How to get there is a rough road.
It's
but
life.
That's art for you, right?
That's art. That certainly is art. What is art without risk, right?
Well, that's the idea, and it's like, and I think that's the thing. It's like I'm listening to you talk about, how do you, like, I'm thinking, how the hell is she going to do a performance piece on this book? And then I'm thinking to myself too, like, but that's the question. And then you start ruminating the question, and you end up finding tiny answers. And just like your book, the fragments start moving. You start moving these fragments around. And then it may not be the picture of the book, but it could be a meditation, like your friend said. I don't know what it was, but I know how it made me feel. And I think that's enough.
That's great. That's excellent. That's enough. That's a good start. At the same time, it's both enough and a good start. Yeah. Because I feel like, again, with art, risk is part of it. It's taking the chance. Maybe we'll fall flat on the ground, but the fact that the chances be taken in and of itself, it speaks of the passion for it.
Absolutely.
And people respond to that. People respond to the effort.
I agree, and that's exactly what we're doing here.
Yep, right. Speaking of which. Yep.
Well, Anna Paula, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
Before we say goodbye, where can people go to find out more about your current and forthcoming projects?
My website,
Yeah.
Ana Paula Cordeiro. Maybe you can put that in writing somewhere.
We
So I
will
don't
definitely
just-
put it in the description of this episode.
AnaPaulaCordeiro.com. I am on Instagram. My handle is AnaCo underscript DEX, AnaCodex, at AnaCodex. And the Center for Book Arts is a good place to visit. We have a research library and a fine arts library. And they have an excellent holding of what has been done in terms of book arts for the past, since the 70s, was founded in 1974.
Mm-hmm.
And it covers a very critical period of the book as a form, as a medium, as a craft, as a conceptual piece, as you name it, any number of things. And the library is open to the public. You can make an appointment and you can look at my work and someone else's work. We have an excellent collection there. I highly recommend visits.
People, you have your orders. Go do it right now.
Yep.
Well, like I said, we'll put those links in the description of this episode.
Cool.
And make
Thank
sure we
you.
spell them correctly. So thanks again to Ana Paula Cordeiro for joining me on this very special Inwood Artworks On Air Artist Spotlight.
Thank you very much. It was a lovely experience. And it's just wonderful to be able to talk about it with a good report. Thank you, Aaron. You were fun to play with. Thank you.
Well, I pride myself on being a good playmate.
You do.
So this is Inwood Artworks On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home here in Upper Manhattan. If you have a moment, please show us some love right now by rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. That really does help. Many thanks to Church of the Good Shepherd here in Inwood NYC for hosting us, and to HideSites.com for uptown promotional support. You can support On Air and all of our programming by making a tax-free donation at inwoodartworks.nyc/donate. Be sure to follow us on social media at Inwood Artworks to follow up with all that we do, including the Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Al Fresco, pop-up art galleries, live performances, and so much more. Inwood Artworks is very proud to be supported in part by public funds, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, in partnership with the City Council. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Artworks On Air.